Welcome everyone. This is our 8th session of the Food for Thought speaker series. Today we're honored to have Professor Zach Tumin. He's going to be discussing the coronavirus and information and communications technologies. This is going to be a little bit different. We'll be posing questions in the first half, and then we'll open up to questions from the participants in the latter half. If you have questions, please raise your hand. You can do so by clicking on the bottom left under participants, and we'll call on you and spotlight you. Thank you all for joining us, and I'll hand it off to Bill.
So thank you everyone for coming. We're really excited about this series, and now, we're almost 2 months in. So we're going to keep this going. We've got speakers lining up, taking us all the way into next year. So pretty exciting. We're very fortunate to have Professor Zach Tumin with us. He is one of our highest rated professors. Everybody loves this class. If you haven't read the paper, and I'm going to ask him if he would to start by summarizing it, because it's really excellent. So I strongly urge you to read it. But I've known Zach for quite a while. He was in New York City government for a time as Deputy Commissioner for Strategic Initiatives in the NYPD. Previous to that, he was a fellow at Harvard at the Kennedy School. He was also at the Belfer Center on Technology, Security, and Conflict in the Cyber Age, the Ash Institute of Democratic Governance and Innovation there. He started his career in Boston, working for the mayor. He also served the district attorney, Elizabeth Holtzman, here in New York. He also worked for the New York State Organized Crime Task Force. He was executive director of school safety for the New York City schools. He's worked in finance, in technology. He's really an expert on management, strategic planning, and technology. He published a major book on Collaborate or Perish with Bill Bratton, the former police commissioner, legendary police commissioner of New York and LA. And he's got a new book coming out in 21 about data and using data to make better decisions. And he's a great friend.
It's good to lose your sound just at that moment, Bill.
Okay, you got it back?
Yeah, got it back. Could you say what you were on a thought there? I just want to make sure you finished it.
About your Harvard and UPenn education.
No, he's a great friend, and that's great.
And he's Harvard educated twice, 2 masters from Harvard and a BA from UPenn, but we forgive him for that.
Yeah.
He's come to SEPA. He's trying to mend his ways and unlearn all the stupid things he learned at Harvard. But so far, I see great progress. So we're very grateful for him coming today and joining us. And again, Zach, if you would give us a few minutes on the paper, and then Jeremy and Georgia and everyone else are going to pepper you with questions.
Great, and thanks, Bill. To sum up Bill's recap of my career, pretty clear I can't hold a job. And so now there's an opportunity at CIPA to do some real work, and I'm really pleased and grateful to Bill for making that possible, and the staff here at Picker Center. It's great to see many of my students from the classes here. I'm not going to call you out by name, but I know each of you, and I really appreciate. It's great to see you. I hope your days are going well, and I look forward to catching up offline when that happens. And welcome to everyone else. I'm fortunate to have this opportunity to take some time to look at technology and its implications here in the age of pandemic. There are tremendous implications and opportunities. So let me share some of those. I should say that the paper, I just read it again. It's got some proofing problems and all that stuff. But the main problem with the paper is that in about 12 seconds, it's out of date. This stuff is changing so fast. If I were to write this same paper a month from now, we would have more data, more information, more insight about how technology is shaping our world. As it stands, We have a tremendous flood of information. I've tried to summarize. The insights that we can have now about how technology has shaped our response to pandemic and what it might mean for us on the other side. So we'll be updating this in the coming weeks and months as circumstances require. Let me just briefly talk about a couple things, call your attention to some highlights in the paper. There's, we're just now coming out from, sort of peeking out from under the covers of our enforced confinement to our caves, our palaces, whatever it might be, our apartments, our houses, our homes. And we're discovering as the world begins to try to move forward here, that there's been incredible digital adaptation in so many ways as people adjust to this new world and try to make the best of it, try to conduct business, try to conduct schooling, education. We're here on Zoom. We would never be here before. We might be here, but it would always be a little weird. No, it's not weird. Now this is like normal. So if we bring guests to our class, not in person, but by Zoom, that's now not an inferior solution. It is the only solution. And so there's some sea changes out there that are important to take stock of. One of the first is that we've seen acceleration of moves to online, acceleration of moves to digital in ways that we never would have expected in education and health, law enforcement, in voting, all sorts of e-commerce, all sorts of big moves online, and new innovation as well. And of necessity, we're discovering there's been a whole lot of forced experimentation. We haven't had a choice. We've got 1 million school children here in New York, and there are 100,000 teachers onto Zoom overnight, all with a URL. Go and connect, go and do business. And we've had very uneven results. We're not even sure what the results are. We know we've flattened the curve in the pandemic, but we're concerned about what we're seeing about disproportionate burdens as a result of online education for those who are connected, for those who aren't. Paper goes into some of these domains. Lastly, we're seeing what Ben Evans, part of the Anderson Harless group, market resets. Big moves to e-commerce away from stores, even faster than we ever thought possible. And as a result, for example, you see stores adopting curbside sales in ways that were sort of interesting a few months ago. Now they're essential for survival. They're perfecting their supply chains, which turned out to be unable to readily adapt and support. Many of them broke. We see, stockpiling of goods at the ports that can't get to stores. People binging on everything from toilet paper to beef, depending from one week to the next. That seems to have settled down. But there's a great deal of breakage on supply chains, and I think it surprised a lot of people to see that and worried a lot of people. But nonetheless, we're now seeing adaptation, experimentation, and with all this acceleration. One of the things that we've discovered is that people are incredibly industrious at work. So we've seen a lot of workarounds, people making adjustments to process, to workflow, in the face of shortage of equipment, protective gear, training of staff, of support, lots of industrious adaptation, lots of workarounds, lots of innovation. But we've also seen huge gaps based on connectivity, who has access to the internet, who has access to mobile. Change is unevenly distributed. It's already here, but the change is crippling for some who have no access, and vast swaths of the world still do not in some important ways. And it's enabling and empowering for those who do. And so this gap continues between the privileged and the less privileged around the world, and it stands out in stark relief then even more so under some of these most difficult circumstances. Lastly, we see tremendous experimentation, but with little test proof or validation. Huge experiments are being run without being called experiments. Here are 1 million kids online. Who benefits from it? Who loses from it? What are some of the successful ways that this adaptation has taken place? We're able to take stock of it. We haven't. We need to, because we're seeing that the impacts can be diverse, some extremely deleterious, and some interesting and important closing of gaps. So that just as we're here as part of the normal way of doing business now in ways we might not otherwise have been, a parent can go shop and choose online services for education, without feeling as though it's a poor stepchild to the real thing in the classroom, because there is no real thing in the classroom at the moment. This is it. And so it can fill that back up in very interesting and important ways. And lastly, I want to suggest three overall conclusions that I draw in the paper. The first is that, and the students in the classes that I've taught know this as well as anyone now, that there are no tech silver bullets. All this technology works because it's part of a bigger system. And that system takes people, and it takes platforms, it takes processes. If we're throwing the tech into this world to expect it to solve all of our problems, it's not going to, unless the people are ready to work it. We have the platforms that give them access. We have the processes fixed that adapt to it. And we have the politics worked out that people lend their support to all this innovation and get the jobs done. The second is that we're now in a world of incredible possibilities for precision, for segmentation, for personalization, for customization of services, whether in health or education, defense, law enforcement, whatever, in marketing. Every domain has this new capability of tailoring, personalizing, and customizing with precision for the customer, for the voter, that service or that product, which that individual wants most. If you're not doing it, that's a big red flag. You should be doing it. It's possible to do it. It's hard to do it. That's the subject of a new book that I'm writing now. Maddie Want has joined me as an author, and Rodrigo Becerra, a former recent past CIO at Pemex in Mexico, as our third co-author. We'll be out with that in 2021 from Columbia University Press. The last insight I would offer here, again, no stranger for students in my classes, is that managers matter. In every one of these instances, success with these innovations at scale requires managers who are capable, committed, passionate, informed, empowered to run this stuff. We see disastrous rollout initially for COVID track and trace in the city of New York, 3,000 individuals being hired at astounding pay scale of $57,000 each. Very slow start. No one knew how to manage this. They had no experience. Turns out track and trace is a very complicated process, a very people-intensive process. It's got to be managed. All of these processes are people-intensive with the technology. They have to be managed. That's what our job at Columbia SIPA is, to teach how to do that. Join me in the classroom this fall. Stay connected with us here. But so those are the big three takeaways. Lots of examples. Way too many examples probably in this paper, numbers and stuff. I want to just go up at 10,000 feet or 100,000 feet to give you what I think are the principal and interesting discoveries, and we will start our discussion further at this point with that. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Tumin. So we're going to move on to the question and answer section for we're going to ask questions from the Picker Center, and then we'll move on to Q&A and open it up to the participants. So you have a few questions. If you haven't read the paper, it's an amazing paper, and it really is timely, and it's focused on the impacts of COVID on tech, and tech, how we can respond to COVID. And we have a few questions. And if you have any questions, we'll follow up later on. So I think from a bird's eye view, could you give us kind of, well, actually from the first conclusion you said, there are no tech silver bullets. So with regard to that conclusion, I was thinking about the practical implications of, moving into this new future of tech and remote work. How do we make sure that everyone has access to those things? And you do touch on this in your paper about those less developed countries, but how do we do that for our own country as well? For students who don't have access to computers or internet that doesn't work, or connectivity that's kind of not working as well as it should, especially for streaming. How do we provide those resources to our citizens, and to our people?
I think you do it with three things. You do it with money, you do it with leadership, and you do it with political support and passion. Those three are at the highest levels of our government in short supply at the moment. If we resolve to make sure that broadband came to every town, every school, every house in the United States, we could do it. Nations have done it before us. And we are lagging. So even with connectivity, however, and even with devices in hand, or I should say, and by the way, we have the opportunity to leapfrog here around necessarily connectivity that may not be essential for some of our purposes, that we can instead move to mobile. Many areas of the world have done that. I would suspect it's hard to do schoolwork necessarily on those platforms, but the opportunity to leapfrog here to solutions that are light and portable and within everyone's reach is certainly possible. But that said, also don't forget, here in New York especially, we have a gap in how kids are studying and where they're studying. Not everyone has, many apartments in New York. We have a couple of families in the apartment, or we have 5 or 6 individuals, grown-ups and kids or more, trying to eke out and carve out some space to do their brain work and be thinking about it. And we've got an extraordinary burden placed on parents here. Some would see it as an opportunity to connect in ways they never would have with their children. A lot of them have to go out and make their earnings. So that's another gap that needs to be closed, that ability to support the move of parents to the workforce, whether we open the schools in some hybrid fashion or keep them closed. That's also critical here.
Thank you. And from a psychological perspective, you mentioned in your paper that there's kind of this reticence from workers to come back to the office. They kind of see it as, well, if we can work from home, what's the point of coming to a physical space and risking contracting COVID? Could you talk about why there's that clash? I understand that people don't want to be in the office and contract the virus from the employee side, but from the employer side, why is there this, for those who can work remotely, why is there this desire for them to be in the office? Is it a management issue?
I think it's a perspective. Everyone knows that their bosses have a particular predilection, one way or the others. So I think if you look at the large companies, they're taking stock. What does it take for us to keep our employees safe? Why do they have to come back? Can we manage our business effectively in place? There are some firms, some enterprises, that's not possible. But in government, I mean, clearly, the New York Police Department cannot manage its business from the home. We need police officers out there doing their jobs. That creates risk, creates exposure. But then even in the New York Police Department, there are tremendous opportunities for everyone to stay where they are in home, and for them to do their work. I think, listen, we're seeing mindsets. People want to come back to work. They want their offices, they want everyone together. It feels like work. Guess what? The field of work is different now, and it's going to stay different. You have big companies that are already committed to January 1st, at least through December 31st, of stay at home. They've made their peace with it. And some employees are probably unhappy about that, and understandably, because work is not just work, it's social. All work is social. So now social has gone entirely online instead of in person. It's all different. Anyway, so that's the best answer I can give you. If that's a decent one, I don't know.
Yeah, it's great. And on that point about, this sea change towards working remotely, do you believe that it's going to be a cross-sector description in terms of having some industries just be remote for the future, and then some industries continue to be in physical, or are we shifting all industries that possibly could be remote into remote spaces?
No, I think government's probably less prepared than most sectors for the move home. It's certainly the most regulated, skeptical of its workforce, sitting at home wondering what they're doing. But the fact is that knowledge workers, the work of knowledge workers can be done remotely. I think everyone sees that, knows that. Maybe it's not as much fun. Maybe it's a different slant. But then there are, so I think you see wide variation across nations, across sectors. If we were to do our jobs at CEPA, we would spend some time thinking about what it will take for a nation, or for a company, or for a government to wisely decide when and how to move people back into the office. But we're not there yet. There's obviously strong pressure to get these schools open, get people back on the jobs, get parents back in the workforce, get cash flowing again. But there's also great pressure from teachers and from staffs and from parents who don't want their children exposed and don't want to be exposed to this great uncertainty. They don't want to be the canary in the cage here, and understandably so. So this is something that, I think that we'll see firms begin to distinguish themselves by offering sort of COVID-free environments, very secure, very protected, very scanned, very tested, where you can walk around and know that that your risk here is about as low as it's going to get, and you can go about social life in some important and work life as it once was. But that we're not there yet, but we may get there pretty soon.
And on the government level, how does that is this working remotely? Is this an issue for government in terms of logistics, in terms of finance, or is it, from what in your paper you talked about how TikTokers managed to ruin Trump's Tulsa rally, for example? Is it because also of cybersecurity? We saw yesterday Twitter was hacked for a bunch of prominent figures, Barack Obama, Elon Musk, and Bill Gates. So is that also factored into why government is not really jumping into it as much?
Absolutely. It's terrifying for CIOs and for chief information security officers to have to manage this plethora of work from home devices and connectivity. It's absolutely a concern.
Thank you. And you mentioned in your paper, there's a really great section devoted to surveillance and contact tracing and data. To what extent does that give us an insight into not only the development of these technologies to surveil citizens, but also how it's going to be used in the future? And you mentioned that that'll have some impacts on our essential freedoms. And you mentioned Korea. Could you speak a little bit more about how they managed to toe the line between their essential freedoms and making sure that public safety and public health are
Well, Korea was very fast early on in the winter to develop testing. They saw their neighbor China struggling with this. They saw the early signs of the pandemic before anyone else did. Their corporations rolled into action very aggressively to develop tests and to get mobile testing out. So a large portion of the Korean population was tested very early on, and that makes contact tracing much more possible without tremendously invasive steps. Now, there's also plenty of invasive stuff going on, tracking cell phones and where you are and who you are. That's all going to happen under these kinds of circumstances. But Korea is an example, I think, of a proficient and well-managed rollout of these kinds of efforts. Because they got there early, they didn't have a lot of remediation to do. Let's put it that way, in terms of corralling and controlling their population. Plus, they have a track record of success. I mean, there's great legitimacy in how the Korean government managed previous epidemics, and Koreans know that. So that too speaks that ability to message this is something we all need to do again. It's not, I think that is a terribly important component of the legitimacy of government efforts in these matters.
And in terms of the precedent, you mentioned in your paper about how the 8 cardinal rules of change management kind of fell apart, and most people shifted to this just do it attitude. How do we prevent that going forward? I know you lay out steps at the end of your paper, but there's also the psychological aspect, the culture aspect. How do we make sure that obviously this is an unprecedented event. There's a lot of trauma and a lot of insecurity, but how do we prevent those change management principles, those things that we have set in place, from falling apart when they're under pressure?
So I probably spoke a little fast when I said, Cotter went away overnight and Nike rose. Cotter's 8 principles are in some sense timeless. What I meant to say was that there was not a lot of deliberation going on in how we are going to change now. And we have to change now because of the exigency of the moment. There's not much time for consultation. There's not much time for forging a guiding coalition. There's not much time. That said, even as there is also then the press of developing these workarounds that people face all the time at work and make adjustments to all the time at work. Again, not necessarily the full range of Cotter preparations, but our job is to now go back and see the paths that people have walked to new products and services, and capture those that seem most valuable, and use this as a time of natural experiment where we have, it's not a perfect a randomized controlled trial by any means. We don't have, we didn't ask for it and we didn't get it, but we have some pretty clear evidence that something is good is happening. It is working. Let's go back and now understand that, ratify it, embrace it, and scale it. If it's worthy. Sometimes these things are just like, they can't scale. How many times are we going to get the broom cloth? Whatever. They just can't scale. But again, I think the idea here is that we have the opportunity to customize and personalize and make precise a series of solutions that segment everyone in ways that, if we have the right governance, it's not like completely, we're not talking about invasive, not running off the reservation, off the whatever controls. I think that's a locution that one can no longer use correctly. So I apologize for that. What I meant to say was that we need to make sure that we've got that the changes that we embrace are proven, they're tactically valuable, they're part of our strategy. We can scale them, and we take stock and take measure of them as we roll them out and make sure that they're delivering on what we wanted them to do, which is precisely the wins that we're looking for, whether in schooling or in health, or law enforcement, or other matters.
And I think the last question I have, and then we'll move on to the Q&A. You mentioned that this is a rehearsal and dress rehearsal for the climate catastrophe. Could you speak to the parallels between how we prepared for COVID, how we responded to COVID, and how those can be translated into, this kind of climate catastrophe?
Well, I certainly hope that there are those who are much smarter about this than I am, who are thinking hard and looking at this very question. But the hope is that while we've spent a lot of time countering denials of climate change, just as we've spent a lot of time here countering denials of a pandemic, denials of in the face of science that says otherwise, but in the face of science also that's where the answer has been shifting around quite a bit. The evidence of our senses is that we have a serious risk here for this pandemic. It should be similar for climate. Perhaps the lesson that we learned here is that science will not be perfect, yet we need to accept that, just as 275 pediatricians say we shouldn't be going back to school or whatever it is, the world's climate scientists say they may not have exactly the numbers, but guess what? It's really, really important that we address this as a critical matter for the world, for global attention, just as the pandemic must be just not just as city-states and nation-states, but as a global community, one atmosphere, one ecosystem, one world. So,
thank you. Thank you for answering all those questions. And just a quick note, we're having some issues with the audio. It kind of cracks up a little bit. We just wanted to let you know and see if there's anything.
I'm sorry to hear that. Let me see if.
It might just be the connectivity.
Well, that's Zoom for you.
Yeah.
I don't think this one's. Can you hear me now?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows? Anyway, we'll do the best we can. Yep. My apologies.
No worries. So if you have questions, you can click on the lower left-hand corner and raise your hand. I think Georgia has a question.
Yeah, thank you for speaking with us. So you discuss a bit in your paper, and I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about how we maintain the gap between big and small companies, where small companies are already really struggling to maintain the most basic operations, and then how they can really utilize this time to innovate and adapt new and resilient practices without falling behind larger firms that are better suited to adapt in this moment.
I don't have any specific ideas on that, but I'm guessing that you might. You're raising a question that's really important. Is this something that you've considered and you have some thoughts about?
Well, not particularly. I mean, I'm back in Ohio right now in a community with a lot of family that has small businesses that are really struggling right now. And when I hear about, and I know that it's a shared experience by a lot of people, but when I hear about businesses that are doing really well, it's because they're able to invest in new technology and to really proof their spaces indoors and buy a lot of new equipment to make that possible. So I can see how you can do it with a lot of resources. I'm not sure of how you can do it when the day-to-day is becoming more and more hard.
It's really scary. The prospect that we're going to wipe out this middle tier of small businesses in America is terrifying. Walmart is not is not suffering. Target is not suffering. Amazon is not suffering. But your hairdresser, your shopkeeper, your gym, the proprietors who have taken the risks of entrepreneurship to deliver product or service and keep their stores open while we shop well where we need to, they are suffering. And I think I don't know if there's a technology answer to this. I do know that when our government leaders don't have experience in making payrolls and the pressure of writing a paycheck to their employees every couple of weeks, and they throw out regulations and rules and stuff to shop owners who are already under tremendous burdens. It's not helpful, and leadership needs to step in and fix that. But again, I don't have a technology solution for it. I think this is something that's critical for America and around the world to get solved, though.
Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from the audience? Yes, Professor Gondek.
Yes, hi. I do have a question for you. What about the intersection between human health, mental and physical health, and staying many, many hours online? I mean, children can't play together under those circumstances, and ballet dancers can't dance together, and so on. So, you know, what research has been done to show us? Because in past times when there were great new technologies like radiation, even birth control initially, when it was put on the market in 1962, was 10 times the dose that was needed. And it had to be retracted because it did a tremendous amount of damage to women. And television and other things and video games, people have to struggle to keep their children away from it. So, and now we have this phenomenon of reentry anxiety. So with all of these mental and potential physical sort of liabilities, what do we do about that? Or what can we anticipate from spending hours, even for our vision, you know, staring into a computer? Any thoughts on that?
I think the best answer that I can give is that we need to experiment now and take stock of the data that we have now to create an emerging best practice for children and segment who can handle this and who can't, for grown-ups, who is benefiting from this and who doesn't, and to begin to personalize the experience of schooling, of the delivery of health services in ways that are customized to the individual. We have data now emerging. We need to take advantage of it, and then we need to translate that into technology, products, and services. If we're going to live on this for a long time now, or for some time to come, and if we're going to adapt to this as we might over the next couple of years, we can't just fly with a finger to the wind here. We have got to very fast understand when children can manage the online world, what the products and services need to be to help them do that, and how parents can become involved in that and in their schooling if possible. So it's the best answer I can give at the moment, which is to say, let's go out there and grab this data now and spend some time very quickly figuring out what works and what doesn't work and for whom, and then come back and tailor. It's a great opportunity for innovation, for entrepreneurs to be able to provide this kind of segmentation in products and services and health and education and the like. I hope that that's a helpful answer.
Oh, it is. Thank you.
Oh, sure.
Thank you, Professor Gondek. Next, we have Tanner.
Hey,
Frederick.
Hey, Professor, great to see you. How are you?
It's great to see you. I recognize that office, I think.
I would think you would. Hey,
nice. Those windows open yet, or they still got them closed for you?
Yeah, they're closed. It prevents the suicides.
Yeah.
You know, so, but so first off, like the paper, you know, not that you need platitudes for me, but really well done in getting your hands around an incredibly complex issue.
Thank you, Fred.
And so that, and not just in terms of talking about, but I really enjoyed reading the imperatives for the managers and you know, kind of
Great. Great.
I'm going to ask you to look into your crystal ball a little bit here, and so you know, some things. I think some things are going to go extinct. So let's live in a happy world for a second, where, you know, 6 months or a year from now, there's a vaccine similar to polio. But I think there's some things that aren't going to come back, right? And I think of things like, you know, cash currency as legal tender. You know, why would we use it going forward, right? I think some big businesses are realizing, like, hey, we don't need 30,000, you know, square feet of office space in downtown Manhattan to be effective by virtue of technology. Any other thoughts in terms of what you see, like, you know, hey, these things aren't going to come back regardless. And then other things, I think, to the professor's earlier point, you know, something like wedding halls, right? Like, you know, virtual weddings aren't, you know, tech isn't going to solve a virtual wedding. I think some of those things will come back, you know, very quickly, haircuts, etc. You know, but you know, any thoughts in terms of the things that, you know, we may have seen for the last time?
You know, I don't know when the next time is that we're going to get into a movie theater. We've really, Netflix has wiped the floor with the big movie chains. There's you know, there's extinction on the horizon for a number of businesses like that. At the same time, there are businesses that are going to benefit enormously. If you make home office furniture, if you make home office equipment, you're going to be doing a land office business. People who are going to adjust to their home offices and want to look nice. They're going to have some wherewithal, maybe corporate allowances, whatever it might be, to do that. To outfit themselves not on a casual basis for their technology, but with some serious tech stuff as well. Now, this may be at the highest end, but the point being that as some business models can no longer survive, other business models will emerge that flourish in this environment. And it's a great question, I hope that I'm getting a message. My speaker is not working. Does everyone hear me okay?
It'll come in and come out. So the beginning was a little frazzled.
For heaven's sake. See, Jeremy, I need some real home office gear here. I mean, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, that's what we were talking about earlier. These technical difficulties or any kind of connectivity issues is one of those problems that can't really account for.
Well, forgive me. Thank you. I apologize then.
Do we have any other questions?
Just on a side note, today Zoom announced that they created their own home theater kit that you can use in companion with the Zoom app, and it's $599. It includes a video camera that goes all the way around and like 5 different speakers that you all attach to your computer. So Zoom is already taking off with this and really trying to just make it as best as they can. Maybe Zoom is the only winner of this pandemic.
Nice, Emily. Thanks for that. Good to see you.
Next we have Jennifer.
Yes, hello. My name is Jennifer Burden. I don't so much have a question, but I just wanted to empathize with you about what you said early on about how quickly the data is changing. From the perspective of a parent, I have a daughter going into 4th grade and a daughter going into 8th grade. And every time my school district sends out a survey, I feel my answers changing all throughout the pandemic of what I think is the best scenario for the kids going back to school, versus online learning versus, you know, an amalgamation of the two. And so I just wanted to give that feedback.
Extremely, very dynamic situation, very dynamic environment, data constantly changing, and our impression of it, our experience of it changing. We're tired, we're not tired. We're excited, we're not excited. Take your pick. We're on all sorts of roller coasters here, and depending on when you're asked and what you're asked, you could be in a valley, you could be on a peak. So even with the best data, we're going to need to take care of that and continue to monitor. Once you've taken your surveys and you've taken your polls, you better do it again pretty soon.
Right.
Things are going to change, and I think it's a dynamic that if you can package low-cost sampling solutions for rapid rollout to your workforce, to your families, to your educators. Testing the sentiment, understanding where it's segmenting, getting things fixed for people, it'll be, I think, a real advantage for you in leadership management.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good question.
Do you have any other questions, comments, feedback? Okay. Well, I have one, and this is from the early part of your paper when you're describing this kind of, the system is fragile and how do you make changes when everyone's kind of just rushing to respond to the crisis. Also going back to those cardinal rules, but, and then now with, you know, the protests, Black Lives Matter protests, and then the no mask protests and all these kinds of this kind of social unrest, how do we balance that desire for change and reform and sometimes even radical change with, you know, the fragility of the system right now? It's under pressure from the virus, but also from all these different forces that have very different claims.
I think I'd like us to make a big bet on democracy and make sure that how we respond to this is as important as anything at this time, and that means collaboration. It means sharing governance, new modes of governance for how citizens will come together with government and make decisions about what happens next. People who need to go to work aren't going to want to sit around all night, you know, having dialogue about how government should do it or what they should do, but they want to be consulted and they want to be engaged. So the best advice I think that we can offer is to have faith in democracy, protect it, defend it at all costs. If that means you know, making sacrifices for it, then that's what we must do. It's that there is this kind of expression going on today. It's difficult for many Americans. It's welcome by many Americans and around the world. And we need to know that we need to welcome that diversity, embrace it, and make sure that the way that we go forward reflects all these great passions that animate us today. So that's sort of it's a milk toasty sort of thing, but you know what? It's stuff that matters. So as you know, I worked for the New York Police Department for several years. Law enforcement for 20 or 30 years, and this is a sea change moment. I see men and women in uniform struggling mightily to adapt, to adjust, and I see some standing still. Standing still is not going to make it. And I think the great leaders of all organizations know that in this day and age, standing still is not the answer. It's a red flag. If you haven't, if you're not changing here, it's a red flag. You need to, Same for if you're not personalizing and segmenting, that's a red flag, you need to. If you're not experimenting here, that's a red flag, you need to. This comes down to managers and what we think managers ought to be doing. So that's the best I can do.
Thank you. Let's see. Any other questions? I think there are no more.
Well, listen, I want to thank everyone for bearing with us today. Thanks for sharing this hour, letting me share this hour with you. I've got a course, my course on effective management is going to be taught in Exec Ed Saturdays in this fall. We welcome you. I think it'll be mostly online, it'll be all online. At the moment, I don't have plans to be in the classroom. I wish I could. I'm grateful that I had the chance even last semester to be in the classroom for the 6 weeks that we did with my students there, because when we broke for COVID-19 and went online, at least we had that foundation. I think we're going to discover how important it is to recover that in some way, even when we're never in a room together, as is going to happen this fall. I'll commit and make a promise to do the very best that we possibly can. So,
thank you so much. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. It's wonderful to see everyone. Peace. Good luck with all. Stay healthy. Stay safe. And have a great day. And thank you as well. Appreciate it.